Tax Pros 1. This program is proudly sponsored by Tax Pros 1, 13908 Alameda Road, Houston, Texas 77053, 832-215-4307. Tax Pros 1, Tax Pros 1, 832-215-4307, 13908 Alameda Road, Houston, Texas 77053. 832-215-4307, 13908 Alameda Road, Noble Perry, Noble Perry, Noble Perry. Proudly sponsored by Noble Perry, Real Estate Sales Specialist, 832-797-4014, 832-797-4014, 832-797-4014. Noble Perry, Noble Perry, Noble Perry, Noble Perry, Noble Perry, 832-797-4014. Noble Perry.
Well, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I tell you, everywhere I go, and I know most of you have a little bit better home training than this. Try it again. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Much better, much better. Not as great as I want, but I know that members of the Conrad Johnson Band here who have played so wonderfully. My spouse had an opportunity to join me, and I swear I was having conversations, but he put me on mute. So he didn't hear anything else once he started hearing those lovely sounds that he grew up with and that I have grown up with. So thank you so much for opening us up, and I'm looking forward to more musical stylings at the end of this particular presentation. To the students and guests here at HCC Southeast, I bring you greetings from San Jacinto College Central and the San Jacinto College District, where I am the Social Sciences Department Chair, as well as a historian with a specialty in civil rights movement, African Americans, and generally the Texas historical paradigms. Today I wanted to just take a brief walk and have a conversation with some students. A little tempted, and I don't know if I could get a little Earth, Wind, and Fire. I don't know. Do you remember? Yeah, just a little something. Is that too much, or we're not taking requests? I understand if we're not. I understand. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Well, I asked the Conrad Johnson Band to offer, and I thank you so much for indulging me with a little bit of Earth, Wind, and Fire to pay homage to Maurice White's passing, but also to the wonderful history and legacy that band has put forth for many of us. Many of us remember. I even seen some of you younger ones who probably have no concept, but you heard it somewhere, and it just kind of gets in your soul. But it brings me to my particular title today, Do You Remember? Do you remember? And so I just want you to walk with me for a moment or so as I talk about hallowed ground, sites of African American history, which happens to be the national theme as presented by the Association for African American Life and History, the ASALH Association. Now, ASALH each year will present us with a national theme, and Dr. Bagé and Dr. Williams and I, as members, we know that we have to remain very dedicated to those particular themes. Now, I know other places across the country will have modifications of the themes or even have something different. But as card-carrying members of ASALH, we feel a commitment to follow that particular theme as identified by the particular association with very brief annotations. And so this particular theme this year was designed by ASALH as to discuss the preservation and the culture and the conservation of African American history. Also highlighting the national park system, one of the relationships or partnerships that ASALH has. But in that same vein, I want to further explain or expound upon what my wonderful colleague, Professor Bagé, spoke about, Mr. Carter G. Woodson, or Dr. Carter G. Woodson.
Right.
Now, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, a historian, was the brainchild of what we now call Black History Month, but many years ago, it was identified as Negro History Day and then later Negro History Week. And after some debates and a lot of work with politicians, we would eventually move up to Negro History Month. Now, I'm not going to belabor the particular conversation because I know some of us were like, well, why we get February? That's the shortest month of the year. Even though we got an extra day in 2016. Which but as historians and others, we also know that at least in this 21st century, we should be teaching our Black history as a part of the American history paradigm. In much the same way that we should be talking about our Mexican American history, our Asian history, our middle history, because these are all particular ethnic and racial groups that help to build this great country that we call home. You cannot be exclusive or try to compartmentalize and say, well, it's a small thing, or why are we trying to segregate ourselves? We're not segregating ourselves, we're integrating a more popular story. Now, students out there, those of you who have taken History 1301, 1302, or you're about to take it, I saw some individuals doing a little homework as I walked in. I'm going to try to help you with a few answers, maybe. But understand that it was persons who were brought to this country or invited to this country in the case of immigrants from Southern and Central and Eastern Europe that would help build this country. Of course, in the place of our African American brothers and sisters, our African brothers and sisters, I should be more correct. We know that the invitation was not really theirs, as many were coerced or tricked or forcibly placed on slave ships and taken on what would be called the Middle Passage and dropped into the Caribbean, and then later moving into what we now know of as the Gulf South, and then into the eastern seaboards of the Carolinas. From there, these particular African women and men and their children would begin a forceful legacy, growing and growing this particular country, cutting down trees, building holes and making holes in mountains, helping others as a labor force. There were some who were free, and just to keep it from being a lecture, I will defer to Professors Dr. James Ross Nazal and Professor Cheryl Ballard, as well as Professor Andries Bagday and a host of others who can go into more detail about those who were free, but many of us want to become intimately familiar to those who were enslaved, and we see them as victims, but I have to say there were some agents of their destiny. Some who took the reins and said, I will make you a slave, but I'm going to change it for the future. Our Phyllis Wheatleys, our Frederick Douglasses, those individuals who may have been beaten back and may have not had food on a daily basis, but realized, much like Harriet Jacobs said, I would rather hide in a crawl space far away from a master who was threatening many multiple abuses that we would now say, oh, he would be in jail for being a pedophile. I would rather sell my children than to allow myself to be raped and taken again. That's that history that has to be discussed. Now, as we begin this particular conversation or discussion, I thought it would be good to look at some of the images that are right here in the Houston area. Wish I could dim the lights just a little bit, but hopefully you can see it from here. The very top image here is that of a sign that is at the forefront. I think it's on West Montgomery, the Acres Home Citizens, thank you, Citizens Chamber of Commerce. A people building community. Welcome to the Acreage Home Community. The proper name is the Acreage Home Community. A area or community that was predominantly for African American families and still very vital. For those of you who are unfamiliar, maybe just a little bit younger than I am and some of the rest of us, I'll make it a little plain for you, give you your nomenclature. It's the fofo, baby.
Fofo. Fofo.
Some of y'all like, oh, that's what that is.
Yeah, fofo.
This is an image of the Riverside or the Negro Hospital. The Negro Hospital. Right there in 3rd Ward. I mean, this is the hospital, the first hospital where many Negroes went to give birth, to get medicine, to get what we will later identify as food stamps, to get assistance. This is all we had. This is probably the hospital that I recall. It was also a place for nurses to get training. Because there was a time period in Houston's history where women of color, African American women, Negro women, and that other term that we choose not to say, had to attend the Houston Negro Hospital School of Nursing to become educated in the paradigms and the structures of healthcare so that they could take care of their own people. Many of us immediately say, well, I want to go to the boutique hospital. I'm going to the Memorial, the St. Luke's. But before there was a grand medical center, African Americans, whether they were in the 5th Ward, the Nickel, whether they were in the 3rd Ward, the Trey, whether they were in 2nd Ward, 1st Ward, they went to this Houston Negro Hospital. There's also an image, as you can see, of KCOH. I know that we got some music lovers in here, and even though it's been through some recent transitions in 2015, 2016, been bought out, call numbers being changed, this was the bastion of music right there on Alameda. Now, the uniqueness of a KCOH for many years, especially as a young child when I would pass by riding the bus, some of you know the Metro, was that you could always see a Ralph Cooper or Wash Allen actually DJing and speaking to the public. And if you walk close enough to the class, they would even give you a wave or point out, hey, young child. You know that poem, Hey Black Child, that many of our young kids are reciting this Black History Month. I want to say that they borrowed that from Wash and from Mr. Cooper. I also couldn't resist because I had to put my home and where I grew up and where I passed on many occasions, at least putting a sign there because the images of the former Emancipation Park weren't as great. But that's at Emancipation Park right there on Dowling Street, now being totally rehabbed and gentrified so that it can look more appropriate for the high rises that are being built around it. But before we had the high rises, and Dowling housed the People's Party too, where, well, I don't want to give too much away. This was the park for many Negro persons, colored persons, blacks, and now African Americans to take their children on Juneteenth and the 4th of July and any other day and Sundays and to go play. To have the family time that we no longer are seeing existed. Those are those hallowed memories and those sights. Finally, for those individuals, I knew I got some money makers in here. Some people who saying, well, you know, I bank with Wells Fargo, and I applaud you because I have a close relationship with them because of a family member. Oh no, it was Bank of America. That was the first bank. We got to talk about that. It was like, yeah, I know about the Italian corner. But right here in Houston, Texas, many African Americans, Negroes, persons of color, wouldn't go to a Bank of America. If they had to put their money in someplace other than under their mattress, they went to good old Unity Bank. That still remains the only black bank here in the Houston area. Those are some of those hallowed memories and the sites of African American history that we need to know, because many of us tend to think that, well, African American history and those sites that we see on PBS or that we've seen on Lifetime, they only happen in the South. You know, places like Mississippi, places like South Carolina. Well, just a little FYI. Texas is South, y'all.
Yeah.
You can't get much more southern than Texas.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, what I normally tell my students that anything south of Canada is southern because we had a heck of a way with dealing with racism and discrimination and segregation, whether you were in Michigan or whether you were in Texas. And so, although we want to have a very distinctive nature and identity about issues of race and class, and even in some cases, as I was once told, we had no civil rights movement here. Our Negroes were good Negroes. How dare you consider doing any type of research about that? And I was beginning to go through the archives at the Center for American History and at the Houston Public Library and at the Dallas Public Library, and I began to see sit-ins. I began to see persons of color being lynched. I began to see protests. I began to see a very young Reverend William Lawson coming in and working with those individuals at Texas Southern to give them a black student union and a voice. This is our history. But I know that I had to probably make this particular presentation just a little bit more personal, just a little bit more understandable. So you didn't say, well, she's disconnected from what I understand and what I understand where you've been, but I need you to know where I've been. Voting machines. As I grew up, voting was very important to my family, to my great-grandmother, and to my grandmother. It was one of those constitutional rights that was supported by the 15th Amendment, but unfortunately, when it was passed in 1870, it wouldn't be until 1965 when individuals of color could finally possibly go into a voting booth and cast their vote without being beaten back completely. Now, I have images because I wanted people to see that, you know, when they talked about behind the velvet rope or behind the velvet curtain, there was actually machines where you had to go in and close the curtain, and it was a truly secret ballot. But now we've moved to more electronic and in some cases something a little different. That episode on Scandal, that was serious when they took the chip out, and this is an indication of it. In April of 1968, I can remember it well, even as a very young child, that many persons, including my great-grandmother, Miss Lily Bell Scott, was shaken to the very core of her being after she realized that Dr. Martin Luther King had been assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. Now, many of you will say, well, that was a long time ago, and, it really didn't affect people here in Texas, but it did. People became silent. As silent as many of us were to maybe date myself when we heard about the Rodney King incident. Maybe it was James Byrd, or maybe it was very recent when we heard of what happened to Sandra Bland. We became silent. In Washington, D.C. in 1968, major streets were sealed off and fires were set to businesses and buildings as well as residences. President Johnson tried to quell the people and calm the people. He even said that Sunday should be a day of mourning. He even canceled a scheduled trip to show his particular grief and bereavement with the King family to a trip to Hawaii because about concerns for the Vietnam War, because he said it was now time for this country to try to heal. However, about a month later in late May of 1968, I would come to learn, as my grandmother quickly told me, that the medical center is growing. Maybe one day we'll be able to go there. Because this would be the medical center where a Dr. Denton Cooley would perform the first heart transplant in the United States. Right here in Houston, right down the street, South Main. Now, these two events, some historians and even some of you may say, well, these two events are polar opposites. They are on opposite ends of the spectrum historically. But if you contextualize them, especially in terms of national and Texas history, you will come to understand that these are a part of the hallowed memories of many individuals. I know that in History 2381, at least at HGC Southeast, many students in prior classes, and maybe still in current ones, are directed to do all histories. I know that the Black Student Association members in prior years have went to nursing homes and assisted living facilities, and they've listened to the voices of the elders to learn of what happened in the 1960s and 70s. And their understanding was much better. We have to come to understand, as historian Carol Camp Yiki said, that race intersects with both gender and class to create multiple disadvantages. And far too often, the challenges confronting women of color, men of color in general, have been subsumed under the strategies and programs which have largely accommodated the white race. Now, what Dr. Yiki was suggesting in this statement is, unlike the darker skinned races, white men and women enjoy institutional access to information. It's a privilege. They have institutional access to knowledge. It's a privilege. And they have informal contact with power brokers. And because many persons of color, specifically African Americans, do not enjoy that specific white privilege, they have a different trajectory. And so those memories of what happened many years ago actually are innate in their souls. Much like those memories are innate in me. Now, I'm not seeking to ask for sympathy, or I'm not soliciting any type of apologies, but merely sharing what will be my story, as I've encountered what W.E.B. Du Bois called double consciousness. I've had to face the burden of overcoming the present and dealing with those hallowed memories and those sites of African American history as I navigated the vestiges of race and gender discrimination and subsequent social inequalities. I know I don't look like what I've been through, but thank God for it.
Yeah.
I've had many blessings as I navigated my academic and professional and in many cases even personal pursuits. At the same time, I experienced similar challenges. Where will I be able to find my books? Because there were some individuals who didn't like the melanin in my skin tone, so they hid them for me when I was in law school. I can remember wanting to get on a bus right there on Main Street, but it passed me up when I realized it wasn't just because it was crowded.
Yeah.
And maybe again my
Yeah.
melanin, my skin tone was
Yeah.
just a little bit too dark.
Yeah.
So when I was growing up in the wink of an eye and a nod of a head of downtown Houston, I'm reluctant to say the word shadow anymore because it brings up an entirely different connotation among individuals and a conversation for a much later discussion, that dark shadow of individuals. I grew up in the nod of a head in 3rd Ward. What my spouses told me, you have to identify as a trait. I was socialized early to see history, but to a young female that was responsible to take care of stuff, and that means me and others. The research that exists about the education in those African American sites, I had to learn on my own. This image, I know it's a little old, but this is of my uncle and my aunt many years ago, and this is me at 5 years old. Very knowledgeable, very astute. I'm into it and I'm happy. But I was observant and I wanted to understand what they were seeing, even at the lab. I attended racially segregated inner city schools, despite the fact that Brown versus the Board of Education has been passed just a little over a decade and a half prior. I was proficient in 3 R's, but there was little or no introduction to the sciences. Now, fields that many of you students have access to. You can take biology, you can take chemistry, you're allowed to enter into anthropology. You see the connection of how history and government can assist you in understanding those fields, but that wasn't my experience. In terms of social study or history, my reality was really a daily dosage of the People's Party 2, an organization in Houston based on the Black Panther Party, and probably most notably recognized in many historical circles and some law enforcement circles as being affiliated with the death of activist Carl Hampton. Now, the People's Party, too, in terms of those hallowed memories and that African-American sites, this was located right center in the hub of 3rd Ward. Right before you got to the bottom, but in the middle before you got to the upper McGregor area. I mean, it's right there at 2828 Dowling, and it began in the early 1970s. And as a young kid walking home from school from Blackshear Elementary to my grandmother's residence on Hutchins Street, this became a daily routine. I mean, I would pass by and truth be told, even though I'd heard many old people, you gotta listen to those elders when they tell you, talking about the misogynistic and the violence that the men of the Black People's Party might bestow upon me. I wasn't afraid. I was even told by my great-grandmother, don't you look over there at them being folk. They look at those women a certain way. But every day it was those brothers with those berets on sitting out on the front establishment who yelled across the street for us, young bloods. That was me. I'm a young blood to stay in school and to run from the boogeyman, aka the drug dealers and the pimps, the ones we want to vilify now. I was told to stay away. And this was somebody who looked like me, telling me to move away. Stay in school. Stay in school. I remember even receiving cheese sandwiches, and that was a time when I didn't even like cheese. But these members of the Black People Party were responsible for food pantry missions before it became socially acceptable in many of our urban churches. Every church got to get one. They were feeding their community. They realized that young boys and girls and older adults may not have a meal, and if nothing else, more than this cheese sandwich would keep another sister running alive. And that's what they did. This narrative may not seem bleak, and on some days, as I recall it, especially on Sunday trips to the neighborhood church, I did a lot of walking back then. I am proud to recall that my ride down streets of and within that familiar community, but then I remember that this was not Main Street's reality. I would come to learn as I entered into junior high, now what you guys call middle school, that my classmates who lived in River Oaks or Highland Village or the South Lakes reality, that this was not their reality, that they didn't pass by a people's party too, that they were going to cotillions and balls and galas, and they didn't have to be afraid of what was on Dowling Street. Many of my instructors in the early elementary years began to move me from the invisible to the visible placement in the classroom. They told me that I had a voice and I had an education, but if I understood my history and recognized the particular principles that had been received. They told me that I would need to understand things like voting rights and why it was so important to have a memory of voting. This is an image of a local 5 and dime store, the Moses store in Dallas, Texas, around 1950 or 60, where persons of color weren't allowed in. It was very similar to the Woolworths that was in downtown Houston, where many African Americans, Negro, colored folks couldn't sit down. You can shop, you can buy your comb, buy some toilet paper, but don't you go sit there and ask for that. Many individuals even would hear things like, we don't serve. And I'm going to say it, boys and girls. We don't serve niggers here. That's it. But it would be some individuals who would say, well, that's good because I didn't order it, I wanted a Coke. Understand that. Now, I'm not trying to be racially inflammatory. I'm giving you a primary source reference, okay? I need you guys to understand, because as we spend so much time sometimes right now being too politically correct, we miss the history, we miss the code, we miss the foundation. This memory and voting that my teachers told me about, a company that started early, explaining to me that this 15th Amendment, this constitutional right, was something that I would have to take advantage of. They said that it was real and that being able to exercise this once I got older would be something that would take me far. They were correct. Now, my story about memory is very similar to the same story of that of one of my leaders at San Jacinto College. I interviewed her about a year ago, and she and I began to discuss my particular trajectory right here in Houston, and we were sharing things, and she grew up in Dallas, and she knew my research is on Dallas, and we talked about voting rights, and as Dr. Laisha Harris spoke to me, she said, I can remember that on each voting day, that she and her brother each year, that they call each other, no matter where they are, to talk about who they voted for in that family tradition. I asked her, I said, well, why is this so important? I said, who does it? I mean, every now and then we do it, but I told her, I said, that could cause a major family, breakdown. You ain't vote for them? What's wrong with you? Oh, you're not black anymore? You voting for those other people? It's like, well, their particular politics don't necessarily align with mine. That's some issues. She began to explain to me, and I began to accept her. And I remember, she said, well, I could remember some years ago going to this store in Dallas. And I can remember remember going and seeing African Americans being pushed out and not being allowed to have a Coke or a burger, and asking my mother and my father, like, well, why? They said, "I want to eat." And they shared that you was told as a young child, we don't want to get in trouble. We don't want to have our homes taken away from us. We don't want to have daddy's job getting fired. She said as a young child she didn't understand. She said, but her mother told her that one day things will be different. Immediately she and I bonded even closer. Because I could remember my grandmother saying, one day things will be different. So I ask you, what will be your hallowed memory as you look back on your history? Young men, young women, our elders. What will be the story that you share with your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, so that they can understand the consciousness that is African American history? Thank you.
Good. Food for the soul.
So I want everyone to know last September when Professor Freer and I were in Atlanta at the Asala convention, and we found out that the theme would be on hallowed grounds. She and I both got really, really excited. So I'm going to say since September until today, she and I both have been thinking about our hallowed grounds and our memories, be it in the family or education, or even just in society. So I'm going to give you some things to think about with respect to my hallowed grounds. I'm originally from Jackson, Mississippi, and normally when I say that, people here in Texas always say, "Ooh, I know you're glad to be from Mississippi." In my mind, I'm saying there's more.
It's produced by Bruce Middleton, the entertainer. 281-684-6758. 281-684-6758. Bruce Middleton, the entertainer. 281-684-6758. Bruce Middleton at gmail.com.
Greater place
Yeah,
to be from is from the Deep South.
yeah.
Because I can walk in a room and within 2 steps, I already know the minds.
Noble Perry, Noble Perry, Noble Perry. Proudly sponsored by Noble Perry, Real Estate Sales Specialist, 832-797-4014. 832-797-4014. 832-797-4014. Noble Perry, Noble Perry, Noble Perry, Noble Perry, Noble Perry. 832-797-4014. Noble Perry. This program is sponsored by
Artie Collins. Artie Collins. They call him AC. They call him AC Collins. Artie Collins. Artie Collins. They call him AC.
281-995-8578. 20400 I-45 North. 20400 I-45 North. Spring, Texas. 77373. 20400 I-45 North. Spring, Texas. 77373.
Set of everybody in the room.
That's true.
Being from the Deep South and graduating from the University of Mississippi, there's nobody in the world that could ever challenge my academic capability.
All right, all right, all right.
graduating from Texas Southern University, starting out as a music major, transitioning into history, being a member of the Ocean of Soul. There's nobody.
All right. Yeah.
There's nobody that could ever challenge my physical, mental, and today my financial stability.
That's it.
So as Professor Freer stood up here and said, know your hallowed grounds, I'm going to say this to my students in 2381. The first day of class, I asked myself, why'd you take this class? All my students said, I want to know something about my people. So there, and let me just say this side note, Professor Freer did not know this ahead of time, but their assignment is to do a family tree.
Yeah.
So if you really want to know your history, you look within yourself.
Yeah.
On February the 24th, I believe. No, on the 24th. Professor Tamiko Meeks and I are having an assignment at the College Park Cemetery. Why? Because we're going to research with respect to preserving our history. A lot of people don't want to go to the cemetery because they think it's death. But from the eyes of a historian, it's life and its primary sources. In the 21st century, I can go and look and stand on hallowed grounds and be in the midst of former slaves.
There you go.
I can ask myself, what did this gentleman go through who was a World War I veteran and he was black? How was he treated? And I can transcend those feelings today with respect to police brutality and how men in the military who are African American, what they're feeling. So don't ever think that, quote unquote, history is boring. History is alive.
Yes.
And to my colleagues in the room who are historians, thank you for everything that you have done. Thank you for everything that you are doing. And especially thank you to my historians and my colleagues who don't look like me, such as Dr. James Ross Nazar and Cheryl Ballard, who are just as committed as I am and Professor Freer to bring you history. So notice and understand that just because the melanin in someone's skin is not the same as yours does not determine their commitment. One of my best friends, as I get emotional, one of my best friends in academia is Stelina Villarreal. We are always on the forefront for our students with respect to multiculturalism and fairness. So what all of the professors and the deans and everyone in this room want you all to understand is that when you reflect on your lives 20 years from now, this room, this building, this institution will be a part of your hallowed grounds. So as I close, Professor Freer, would you please come up and accept this certificate of appreciation for us today? And the certificate reads, Certificate of Appreciation. This certificate is presented to Professor Yvonne Davis Freer in recognition of her valuable contributions to the 2016 Black History Month, quote unquote, hallowed grounds, February 9th, 2016. Some of our other events, and let me just run this by you. Some of our other events on February 16th and 17th at HCC Northwest, Mako Fennell will be talking about hip hop and the Houston connection. On Thursday, February the 18th, and Tuesday, February the 23rd, Dr. Jesse Esparza will be talking about blacks in Latin America. Yeah, that's going to be a really deep conversation, trust me. He'll be here on the 18th in the Angela Morales building at 11 o'clock. You want to be there. And then, as I mentioned, Professor Tamiko Meeks and I are doing Preserving the Past Community Service Project, College Park Cemetery. If you want to go there, make sure you see me. So we have food outside. We want you guys to eat and then come back in, listen to the wonderful Kashmere reunion band, and network, and just have an excellent day. And again, thank you for celebrating Black History Month kickoff with us.
Yes, there's a sign-in sheet. Yeah. Ariel. Sign your name, sign it.
we go. I got a thing. What to do? Sometimes I feel so light. I want to tell you. I got a leg, and I'm super bad. I got soul, and I'm super bad. Brain, up and down. Oh, she got it going on like that girl. That's what I'm talking about. Let your hair down. We want you to have a good time. That's why we're here. Come on. There you go.
Give me the Thunder Soul shot. This there. This program is sponsored by Wayne's Sons Roofing and Sheet Metal, 281-831-4688, 832-495-5565. Wayne Sons Roofing and Sheet Metal, 281-831-4688 or 832-495-5565. That's 832-495-5565. Wayne's son.
Norma's Bookkeeping and Tax Service Incorporated.
The program is proudly sponsored by Norma's Bookkeeping and Taxes, 3040 FM 1960 East, 3040 FM 1960 East, Suite 110, Houston, Texas 7703 at Aldine, Westfield, 281-821-4688. Norma's Bookkeeping and Taxes, 3040 FM 1960 East, number 110, Houston, Texas 77073. This program is sponsored by
Artie Collins. Artie Collins. They call him AC. They call him AC Collins. Artie Collins. Artie Collins. They call him AC.
281-995-8578, 20400 I-45 North, 20400 I-45 North, Spring, Texas 77373, 20400 I-45 North, Spring, Texas 77373.